Hello there, I'm not Angel. I'm Lawnie from Get Off My Lawn, and I'm also the audio lead behind the TIE Fighter Total Conversion for X-Wing Alliance. And I've been invited to talk about the orchestral music you've been hearing in the background of all these fantastic videos. When you care about something, really care, it can drive you to lengths you previously thought were impossible. That's exactly how this soundtrack came about. With the upcoming releases of XWVM and TFTC, I decided to use my audio manipulation skills to extract and clean up the briefings from Star Wars TIE Fighter. Happy with the result, I posted a video about it on my channel and dubbed it Guy Mod. The reception from both teams was incredibly positive, with the XWVM guys allowing me a sneak peek at their work, and the TFTC team getting in touch shortly afterward and asking me if they could use my audio in their game outright. What was first a simple conversation where I planned on saying yes you can, soon evolved into something entirely different. You see, unlike the XWVM team, TFTC didn't have the excellent laser schwert on board, and as a result their soundtrack was going to be a poorly recorded version of an old 90s sound font. This was jarringly out of place with the rest of the project's upgraded graphics, and just wouldn't do. So I asked them about it. They'd planned to reorchestrate the soundtrack, but it was in the early stages, and it was going to be a major task to get something worthy of sitting alongside their other improvements. I'm of the opinion that TIE Fighter's dynamic iMuse soundtrack is one of the greatest in gaming's history, so I told them straight up that I'd do it, on top of remastering all their other audio, which already amounted to thousands of lines of voice dialogue. While I have over 20 years of experience editing audio and recording and writing, I'm no professional. I always take as many shortcuts as possible, and the simplest way to do something is what works best for me. The problem here was that I'd also never worked with an orchestra in my life before. It's an entirely different beast than a band, which usually tends to play 5 or 6 different melodies simultaneously. In the case of TIE Fighter's soundtrack, I had upwards of 20 different sections of the orchestra all playing something different. The game's MIDI notation has been extracted and converted by many sites, but none of them feature the tiny motifs of the in-flight engine, an entirely different score used by iMuse to dynamically shift as the action changes in-game. Fortunately, 2 separate members of the TFTC team had gone directly into the game's files to extract and then convert this score, painstakingly stitching together pieces note by note into a cohesive whole. I opened these up in Anvil Studio, my MIDI editor of choice, and took detailed notes on the corresponding MIDI channels of each instrument. I then mirrored that setup in my free digital audio workstation Reaper, working under the assumption that one size would fit all. Well, the MIDI score has different instrument volumes on a per track basis, and different instruments on different channels depending which track you're playing. Furthermore, the in-flight music was an entirely different beast from the concourse, so I had to mix each track of each song by hand until I was happy with the result. That's about 60 songs with 20 tracks each. You do the math. In order to have anything but silence though, you need virtual instruments to play this notation. At first I panned the MIDI to precisely where their position would be relative to an actual orchestra, but then decided soon after to give the original positional information some credence. Because most of TIE Fighter's audio comes from the centre of the mix, the MIDI is heavily panned. I did the same thing. The result is a soundtrack that is inspired both by Laser Schwert's earlier efforts and the original MIDI instructions, straddling the line between game music and orchestral interpretation. Instead of mixing it like a regular orchestra, I ended up following a combination of volume levels read directly from the files, suggestions from the TFTC team, and my own best judgment. The setup to play all this that I was finally happy with was a mishmash of both free and orchestral VST instruments, and it would be remiss of me not to give them each a shout out. The bulk of the orchestra is Metropolis Arc 4 by Orchestral Tools, whose elite orchestral forces power the string and brass sections of the soundtrack, as well as the timpani strikes, which are in a different register than the original. I went for the volume, pomp and militaristic hammering of an old Foreign Legion marching band, and Arc was happy to oblige. The Sonatina orchestral essentials and Sound Iron Olympus elements were responsible for the choir. Sonatina was also used for some of the woodwind sections and harps, alongside the ever-present Metropolis Arc 4. The horn sections, primarily the trumpets, trombones and French horn, were a layered mixture of Project Sam and Metropolis, but also feature Horns of Hell, whose ability to load a series of articulations at once saved me from multi-tracking those sections by hand, something I had to do for every articulation of every single string section, which was then double layered with a second set of strings in order to reach those low notes. The pizzicato strings are by Project Sam and sometimes DSK Overture, an entirely free instrument that blends nicely with Arc. Instead of having orchestral percussion, I decided to go with the snares and cymbals from legendary game composer Frank Klepacki, who performed for Shreddage Drums and gave that nice imperialistic military drumming that fans of the MIDI score were accustomed to, as it was programmed for regular General MIDI drums. In addition to this, there are cameo appearances from the emotional piano player, the Deputy Mark II synth, and even the odd sound font choice to round out proceedings. There were 3 major releases in total, each named after the flight groups in TIE Fighter. Gamma turned out to be the winning combination after much trial and error. Famous composer Howard Shore once wrote that he often felt like Frodo with a ring when he orchestrated the soundtrack to the Lord of the Rings movies. In my case, I felt like I was also going on a journey, but rather than creating the music, I had to honour the work of the LucasArts sound team that had paved the way. I hope you've enjoyed this little glimpse into my musical world. I'm going to hand you back over to Angel now.
Why, thank you, Lawnie, good sir. Please do go visit his channel and check out his content. In particular, you can watch him pick out random DOS games to play and review, and you can also check out an interview I did with him a few months ago regarding the TFTC project. If you have any suggestions or ideas you'd like to see for future videos, let me know in the comments section. Otherwise, take care, and thank you for watching.